High demand and high revenue, it can hide declining service quality. And then what happens after that is, your reviews will come in, your bad reviews. And we all know how that can affect your business. And so what I'm going to show here is how to calculate your net promoter score first by month and then by technician down here, and then also to create a little heat map. So if you're not familiar with NPS, here's a data set here that I created. And so what you're going to have is you're going to have a score from 1 to 10. And you don't just take like an average of this. What you have to do is you have to take the scores, like how many 9s and 10s are there as a percentage, and then how many 6 and below are there as a percentage. Then you subtract those two, multiply that number times 100, and you get NPS. Sounds confusing, and I'm going to walk you through it because it's not that bad. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the month here, and then we just want a count of the scores, how many scores from 1 to 10, any score. Because then with promoters, we want to get how many of those are greater or equal to 9, and then divide that by 270. And then how many scores are less than or equal to 6, and then divide that by 270. Subtract those two, multiply times 100, and then create a benchmark here. And then for this one, sort of this, and then highlight the table month, not the column. You see how the mouse sort of highlights the column, the letter C? Don't do that. You want to go underneath it, but you'll see the mouse changes, the crosshair changes. And so click that because we want the table month. And one of the other reasons for that is right here, so B3, is because whenever we audit formulas, we can tell, okay, this is the table, the month column in the table, right? Okay, so the next thing we need what's called promoters and detractors. Promoters are, so just download. If you can't find it, shoot me an email, and I'll give you my email here at the end. Okay, we don't need, I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, again, let me just center everything. Okay, so promoters, we want to do COUNTIF again, because now we actually need the COUNTIF, which is why I never use COUNTIF, because sometimes it's multiple criteria, sometimes it's one. So the first thing we can do either way. You can do month first, or you can do NPS score, but I'm going to just do NPS score first. And then close your brackets, and then you have that, right? But right off the bat, you can see that doesn't make much sense, because how can we have 270 and then 1692? Once I know the table name, which is TBL in this example, it'll tell me all of the columns. Like if I do this, it'll give me a list of all the columns here. Less than or equal to 6. Less than or equal to 6. Right? And now we have the percentages. Again, control. You use this bracket here. Because if you don't, this bracket here, because if you don't, you're going to have a math problem. But I'll show you. So equals this minus, and then the gray line to be the benchmark. So just highlight month and count, and then hold down control, and then highlight NPS and bench. You want the columns, then you want the line, then you want the straight line. And the way you do that is you go to the combo charts. And you can see we're almost there, but there's two, right? So we need a secondary axis. So you can just check these two boxes, and then you get that. And then you can click OK. And we have that. You say, it also depends on your data, but I want to do, say, 20 to 60. And so I'm going to double click here. And then the minimum I want is, let's make that, we can do gray. We can, make it thin, because it doesn't need to be super thick. You just want to see something. And then here we can do sort of a dotted line, right? So you can just sort of see how it compares to the benchmark. And then finally, what I'll do is I'll click the red line, and then I'll click this little crosshair and add the data labels. And then if you want, you can move some of these. Maybe they get in the way. If you just click on one, you can just, sort of drag it out of the way. Then I'll click here. We also want to add a technician to it. It gets a little more complex because essentially we're adding all of these into one formula, right? We need, well, actually, I guess we know it's in the table. You open your bracket, we know it's the technician, and you have the same thing here. So that's why I'm including the number 6. Then we take the 9 and 10 percentage, subtract the 6 and under percentage, and then we multiply that times 100. So let's see how to do this, right? So step one, we want to get the count if S of how many 9s or 10s were there for January for technician. So the first thing we can do is we could do month, or you can choose technician, or you can choose the NPS score. I'll just start with the NPS score, but you can do it however you want. Comma, and then quotation. Then we can do technician, comma, Anthony. So 190, but that's not including the month. How many for January and Anthony? How many scores were 9 or 10? But now we need to divide this by the total amount, and I'll show you how to easily do this. So you can do divided by, paste that formula. But now we don't even need this section, right? Because we're not doing 9 or 10. We're doing how many rows are Anthony and January. So that's what this is doing, right? And so now you have a percentage. So we're good there. So the next thing we need to do is we need to do the same thing, but for 6 and under, and then subtract the two. So I'm just going to copy this. Then I'm going to subtract and then paste. And so now what we have here is I need to do less than or equal to 6, right? And then now we're good. So we have 54.83%. And then now what I need to do is multiply all of this times 100, essentially what this is here. So if you remember to drag this over and down to fill everything, but what you'll see is you get an error. And the reason is because all these are changing. B19, you can, like, that's not going to work because Excel is reading this as text. Meaning, how can, if this is text, you can't say, okay, is this less than text, because it's not a number. So what we need to do is we need to tell Excel, hey, I want this to be formatted as a number, but I want to add text before, just to help people, understand it. And so you can press Control-1, and then you can go to Custom, and then click on 0, and then use your quotation, colon, and then space, and then your other quotation, and then click OK. And now it's stored as a number, right? And let me just make this changing, or just a color a little bit to, to help your team understand. But anyways, so that's how you calculate your NPS score by month and also by technician. I mean, if you have the data, you could do it by city, you could do it by service type, right? And also what you'll notice is, on-time arrival flag. So like this, Brandon wasn't on time for this repair in Austin, and your NPS score is 2, which makes perfect sense, right? And so, yeah, so this data set, if you want this data set, there's a link to download it. You can't find it, shoot me an email. If you need help structuring a data set like this, like if you should be able to have this out of, you should be able to export this out of Service Titan. There is a little bit of data cleanup that you have to do, but I know it's possible because I've done it. And so as long as you're capturing that data. And so, yeah, if you need some help with that, shoot me an email. My email is set in-house. Then again, shoot me an email, or there's a link to my calendar. You can hop on my calendar that way. But anyways, that's all I got for this one, and I'll see you in future videos.